Hello, and welcome to our weekly HudUniGames coming to you once again from our superheated home offices, usually University of Huddersfield, but currently still in lockdown. My name is Duke, and I'm joined today by Matt and Daryl.
Hello.
And we're going to talk about finding a project, but before we do that, let's roll the intro. So yes, we are all superheated, super hot, not in a good way.
Super hot.
Oh, I haven't played that for a while. Kind of feel the need. Oh, can you imagine a VR headset in this weather?
Not a chance. It's bad enough wearing this thing.
It is very warm today.
Yeah. I think the weather said it was going to be 29 degrees outside. It looks like it is.
47 in my study, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what everybody else's weather is like. You guys should enable low latency mode on the stream so the delay is lower. Yes,
That'd
if you
be
know how to
really
do that.
cool if we knew how to do that.
Is that a Twitch latency?
Wiki.
Oh, Gary's boiling, I see. Yeah, send us instructions on that one, Scott. That's the advantage of having all our super bright students. They know these things. So the stream today, as I said, is going to be most beneficial, I think, for second years, interesting for first years, and reflective for final years and grads in such a way that if you have anything to contribute on the chat about your personal experience, that would be really handy, I think.
Yeah, actually, that's a good idea. I like that.
So from that point of view, it's
well saved there.
Yeah. Well, that's what I meant by reflective. It's not they've done it. They don't need to learn anything, but they might be able to pass on some information that they feel we're missing out or not paying enough attention to, or whatever it might be. So this is a bit more chatty than usual. We have some slides. We have, of course, we cannot not have it. What's on the box? I assume you've done yours, Daryl.
I hope so.
Yeah. So I think we need to get that bit done first, because I think that's why most people are here, isn't it?
Sure.
For that. There we go. Look, dashboard, Twitch, preferences, channel, latency mode. Can you do that in the middle of a stream?
You're about to find out, aren't you? And break everything.
Yeah. Matt, you keep talking for a second while I look for this preferences channel.
Okay. So as Duke was saying, today's thing is going to be finding a project. So it's going to be a little bit about what to be thinking about over the summer for those second years, especially. What to sort of expect coming forward into next year, and sort of trying to get a mental head start on how to prepare for it. Scott's saying he thinks you have to restart the stream, so we'll do that for the next stream.
Yeah. I have changed the preference, so it should be ready to go on the next one.
If you want to notice that, you can see it from here.
Start again.
See it there?
No, we'll just carry on.
Yeah, we'll just carry on. It'll be fine. I don't know when it changes, actually. It just said low latency for near real-time interactions with participants. So we'll find out next time what kind of magic that affords us.
That'd be nice, actually, because it is always a mile behind.
When you refresh, of course, you lose all the previous chat. So anyway, carry on. Sorry, what's on the box? That's the important bit. What's on the box?
Before we go into what's on the box, Duke,
there's
a really interesting question in the chat.
Right.
How do you apply for final year?
How do you apply for final year? You applied normally, but you put final year entry.
I can't see final link on the portal. Now I'm guessing,
it's
what
through,
you mean is
through UCAS.
Returning student?
Oh, if you're a returning...
Are we talking... Yeah, if you're a returning student, it's a very different thing to actually applying to direct entry into final year.
Yeah, no, if you're a returning student, you just arrive in September and you auto-enroll. If you are a applicant wanting to go into final year, you apply through UCAS, and there's a box of which year, whether you're first year, second year, or final year entry. And then, of course, it relies on what qualifications you already have. So if you've done 2 years at another institution, my advice would be to email compeng, so COMPENG, @HUD.ac.uk. The email's on our website, HudUniGames.co.uk. and that will go through to our marketing recruitment team, who will tell you exactly what you need and how to go through the process.
So they answered our question. So that was a really nice answer for anyone watching on the YouTube channel that is not a second year. But for second year, it'll be automatic enrollment.
Yeah. So you just come back onto the final year by default, unless you're going on placement. In fact, I think everyone is defaulted onto final year unless you say I'm going on placement. I wouldn't worry about it. If you haven't heard anything by mid-September, maybe drop one of us an email and we'll chase it, figure out what's going on.
Yeah. Downside of all of the Twitch chat having unique names, we don't know actually what the student is called.
The sheep
very
one.
Confusing.
Is it the sheep one or the she-e-pony?
Sheepony.
The sheepony. I don't know. Or the she-e-pony. I don't know.
Anyway, let's. Oh, it's Vicky.
Okay.
Oh,
we should have a crib sheet for who all these people are down the side. It'd be really useful.
Should we play your random video, Matt? You ready? I think it'll work.
What? What you can say?
You tell me. The box. Who's in the box? What's in the box? What's in the box?
That seemed to come through without audio, though, weirdly.
No, it had audio. I just
did it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I do like my random midnight video editing session.
Is that Duck Hunt?
It was Duck Hunt. Yeah. Well done. You got what's on the box.
Okay. So let's move on to just Matt briefly, weekly reminder, what's on the box.
For those that are watching, those that have never seen this before, or you're on the YouTube channel, What's on the Box is a game where we read descriptions on the back of a game box, and the rest of the team and the chat have to try and guess what that game is just based on the description.
And I think so far, we should keep scores, because I know I'd be losing. I am terrible at this game.
Actually, somebody could go back and check.
I think for the next one, I'll go back and I'll tally up everyone's
Excel
score.
spreadsheet.
Oh dear, I think I'm on either 0 or 1. I think. So what's on Duke's box? Are you ready? Get my reading voice on. There it is, the particle accelerator you've invented. You are so intent on testing it. I typed this wrong, didn't I? You don't even notice the crackling outside of a not-so-distant electrical storm. Before you can say snap, crackle, and pop, which makes me think of the cereal, a lightning bolt slams through your... I should have proofread it. And the accelerator with deadly accuracy. I was speeding through. When you finally come to, you have no idea where you are. Are you being watched? What? My keyboard skills have let me down. Is this place home?
I have no idea what you're saying anymore.
I do. I've
just read it yourself. What was I doing? I must have maybe I was just head and keyboard. Anyway, in order to survive, you will need to dodge, outwit, and overcome deadly alien monsters and sucking leeches who think you're a delicacy. Now that shouldn't be too hard for a whiz kid like you, right?
This isn't a hard one.
It's not a hard one.
No,
really?
This has to be Half-Life.
Oh, okay. Oh, hang on.
Maybe,
timer. Where's my timer?
Maybe the fact that you said okay like that makes me think that it's not.
There is a lightning bolt, isn't there? Which, weirdly, do you remember playing Half-Life 1 back in the day with DirectX 3, and lightning looked a bit naff, and then you replayed the game with DirectX 7, even though nothing had changed, but of course the rendering of the lighting's different. It actually looked really good lightning for the age.
Yeah. I think the best way, have you played the Black Mesa remake of Half-Life 1?
Not yet. I've seen videos, I've not played it. So,
really good.
Oh, time has just gone.
Good. Okay, so I'm hoping on the chat here if anyone got any ideas, because my Half-Life suggestion I don't think is correct. As we say in WizKid.
Yeah, so actually now you've said Half-Life, it does read like it could be Half-Life.
So it's clearly not Half-Life.
Yeah.
There was anyway 30 seconds up. This is a great. I bought the remake. I had to get my anniversary edition out with the HD remake, which I kind of feel I need to play again.
Go on then. Press the button, Duke.
No.
Press the button.
Right.
I got my 15th anniversary special HD version playing high def.
I've never actually played that game.
I have and didn't. I still don't. I have, and I'm now reading that, and I still don't remember how that relates.
It's the
Crazy.
leeches really give it away, but yeah, it's amazing. It's a great game. Right, moving on.
I might have to go back and play it.
I think the HD version's cool. I mean, the SD version's fine, but onwards. Matt's box. Are you ready for your click?
So
Go
on, click. Mine is.
Oh, that's short.
Mine is nice and short. This is the only text that is on the back of this box. A young boy encounters a mysterious feathered creature. Their fates are intertwined. Silence.
Oh, timer. You know, if it didn't say feathered, this could be Never-Ending Story.
It could be, yeah, but it's not.
Well, no, I don't know if they've ever made a game with that either.
I like your brevity, actually, because mine went on forever. I had to trim it down.
Yeah. Now, this one is... Daryl, you should like this one because you like all of their other titles.
So, time just gone.
I have no idea what this is.
Feathered Friend? Muzzy says Last Guardian. Oh, no, he's pretty... Right, yeah. Oh, and they're all saying Last Guardian. Tried Googling the nap from Feather. Oh, sorry, I'll click, yeah. The Last Guardian?
It is Last Guardian, made by Team Ico, who made Ico and Shadow the Colossus.
Box now. I couldn't even place the name of this when you said it.
See, when this came out, it had really mixed reviews. Some people didn't like it. I loved it.
I
thought it was
PS4?
Great. Yes.
There we go.
Only PlayStation I've not bought so far.
Oh, the 5. You've not bought the 5.
I did say so far.
Well, get a 5 and then you can play all of 4 because it's got backwards compatibility.
Is it good backwards compatibility?
But apparently so, yeah.
3 had terrible
don't
backwards,
know.
didn't it? Is it 3?
What's curious what's
Sorry,
Gary
Gary,
saying.
I'll allow it. There you go. Oh, I've allowed it.
That's it. Encouraging bad behaviour in the chat there, Duke.
That's not bad behaviour.
Cool. Come on, Daryl, you said this is a long one. Let's get ready.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah.
Read
Okay.
it. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. I just went on forever. I had to trim it right down. Luckily, I think I got rid of a lot of the clues, but you're probably going to get it anyway. I think it's really straightforward and easy. Earth 2019, a team of US scientists makes a frightening discovery on an island in the South China Sea. All contact with the team is lost when the North Korean government quickly seals off the area. The United States responds by dispatching an elite team of Delta Force operators to recon the situation. As tensions rise between the two nations, a massive alien ship reveals itself in the middle of the island. Blah 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 blah.
I didn't. If it is Crisis, I didn't realize that's when it was set. Quite interesting.
I didn't. 2019.
It makes sense if it is.
Oh, you've
Crisis,
read it. See, this is the whole problem. We need to start setting rules of don't put things in the chat, don't we?
What? Oh no, we just need to not look at chat.
Crisis. Yeah, no, I didn't look.
Yeah, you did. I think we actually decided last week we weren't supposed to look at the chat, but you continue to do it.
Well, I didn't look at the chat. I also didn't know the answer until Matt said Crisis.
The weird part is that Gary always knows everything. We should have him on here instead.
What? Just replace us with? We should just replace
Yeah,
Daryl.
yeah.
Let's replace Daryl because you're end of life now, aren't you? So
End of life.
best before's passed.
I'm new old stock.
Come on, press the button, Duke. Let's see.
Sorry,
let's see the box out.
Oh yeah, I played this again not so long ago.
Are you all excited to see if your PC can run the Crisis remaster?
I'm not sure mine can run Crisis now.
Yeah,
and I've got a 2070 Super.
They're doing a remake / remaster of it, or is it a new Crisis? I can't really remember, but I think it is a remake. But that should come out next year.
Gary says 3 cameras of me at different camera.
Feel free. Yeah. We could do with a break actually, Gary. You can do next week's.
Yeah. If it's this hot again, yeah, we'll all be a sweaty couple up. Right. So on to the actual. Oh no, sorry, Daryl has a.
Whoa. I mean, I'm assuming that everyone's seen it, but it's just kind of cool. Getting into San Diego Comic Con is a pain in the proverbial. And the really annoying part is I've been once and I got a 3-year pass. professional educational pass to go for the last 3 years. I couldn't go the last 2 years. I was going this year. I got it all planned. I got the entire route and everything sorted, and look what happened. So yet again, couldn't go. But this time, everyone gets to go for free. So run VT.
I already have.
That was it. It's just
That was it.
It's
I
just
completely missed it.
It's just the trailer a bit of. It's just.
It is.
It's explaining your own house.
I quite like that though. I quite like
Yeah.
that. I like my dogs are allowed as well. That's
Do we
great.
know what does it?
Oh, perfect timing. There
Do we know
go.
what it is?
Off he goes.
What they're doing? What's the? I mean, all that's saying is that they're going to do Comic-Con at home, but do we have any clues as to what?
No, I think they're just going to live stream a load of stuff. They're going to get a load of people, celebs and all that sort of stuff, who are also as locked down as anybody else, and broadcast that. Obviously, there won't be the merch. I don't think anyway, unless they can find a way around that. Here's our Amazon channel.
Well, actually, I was looking talking to merch. I was looking about making games at Huddersfield merch, because you can now attach a merch store to your Twitch.
Wow.
Stream.
Go on then, Twitch. We've got 32 people in the stream. Who wants games?
Who wants me to design some merch?
Who wants a COVID mask with the games at Huddersfield?
Or some T-shirts with I pretended to study games at Huddersfield.
I think our games logo would pretty cool.
I went to Huddersfield for an education. All I got was this lousy T-shirt.
We've got at least 2 people. There we go. We've sold 2 already.
Yeah. Because I was actually looking into it. You can actually set it so that we can sell them at cost, so we don't make a profit. It's just you can buy the T-shirts at the cost of printing.
That's good, because we're not allowed to make a profit, so that'd be good.
Yeah,
but also, just on that front, the School of something or other, psychology, or anyway, some of the other schools, they all have hoodies, don't they? They walk around in their psychology and midwifery hoodies. So if we had our own games ones, that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, that'd be quite cool.
Yeah, I might make a store then.
As somebody says, I've already given uni like 30k.
Oh yeah, that goes straight to us, doesn't it?
Yeah. Josh wants a T-shirt with Daryl's face on it.
That can be arranged.
Is Josh Box Josh, as in Presser?
Are we a far too?
Oh, a little Duke plush. Hey, we could do that. Just make a Cousin It plush. Must be a Cousin It plush somewhere.
Just hair coming over.
Well, hang on. Oh, is mine here? Where's my Trello? Tribble.
Trombone? I don't know what you're looking for.
No, my Tribble. I don't know where it is. I think it might be still at work. But I've got my little Tribble, haven't I? That's a plushie of me.
Okay.
Anyway, so we get on with the actual.
The subject matter of this week's live stream.
Before we do, we were having a reminder. I think that we've just done our open day. We told everyone that next Wednesday there's another one. So if you are a potential applicant, a reminder that there is another open day next week. You will get to enjoy more of Matt and a little bit of me answering questions as a presentation. If you're already a student, I wouldn't bother going to an open day. You're already here. Yeah. So the point of today is, I keep getting distracted by the chat. I want tutor cookies. That sounds cool. Little cookie cutter faces of us. Anyway, the point of today is finally a project. What to think about in the sense. I'll go back to the other slides. And this, as we say, is tips for second years thinking about what they're going to do in final year in terms of project. Project suggestions or hints and tips. We'll take some questions if there are any second years, particularly any pressing questions. But also, go on, sorry, Matt.
I was going to say anyone on placement that's coming back. Yeah. It's really good to start thinking about what it is that you want to do.
Yeah, and then we're going to go through basically the suggested structure of the final year project dissertation, literally just as headings, and just talk about the things that we think go in there, what people forget, which is where the current final years and grads come in, maybe things that they think would be handy.
And I also add to this slide as well that it's not what just to think about the project itself and what it is you want to look into, but also there is a process by which you can request a supervisor as well. So if you've got somebody that you think would be good for your project, or you've got on with over the years and you think they'd be, useful as your project supervisor, then you can make a request. We can't guarantee it, obviously. I mean, everyone will sort of ask for Duke, and you can only have a maximum of about 6 to 8 students. But it is worth thinking about that as well. So if Duke's ideal, if you've got a technology-based project or something of that nature, then you should be requesting that. Matt and myself for 3D sort of stuff. Matt for strictly graphic design and stuff like that. So yeah.
If I could just, on the flip side though, you don't necessarily need a subject expert. It is nice, but we are all versed in final year project thinking, research process, and so on.
Absolutely. But it's if you can find those sort of synergies, it's kind of useful.
Yeah, we've already had a tip from Reese. FYP tip: don't try and do something you think others would find smart, but something you think is pretty interesting yourself. I would agree. I mean, if you've got to stay engaged with that for the entirety of final year, I would add to
that. Not just smart, worthy. Don't do things because you think other people are going to think, oh, that's a really good idea for a project. Oh, I like. There's that. We quite frequently get students that are really interested in sort of doing things with people with disabilities because they feel that will get them sort of brownie points from a sort of psychological perspective, but then they fall foul of the fact that they've got to go out there and test on people that are disabled. Getting access to people that fit the particular niche for which you've developed your product can be incredibly difficult.
Particularly also if you drift into education theory and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would genuinely just say to people, like we do for the entire final year. Contemplate what it is that you really want to do when you graduate. What job do you see yourself going into? And can you think of something that would lead in that direction? That's probably the simplest, quickest way to formulate some basic idea. And even if you've only got sort of the sort of shell of an idea and you really want to sort of take that further down the sort of development line, we can be contacted fairly easily and we will give you basic, simple advice. We've seen hundreds of these things over years, so we know what works and what doesn't.
Can I ask a question? How are we 25 minutes into the stream and we're on the first slide?
I blame you. It's too hot.
It's because we got Daryl in, isn't it? No way. How is the first slide? What Reese just said.
Because this is what I tell all of my students on day one, is that pick something you're excited about, because you will struggle to write and research an entire dissertation if you're not completely excited and interested about the subject matter. Pick something that you just spend your time looking up anyway.
Yeah.
And you've spent the last year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it might be, just generally researching out of interest, and that way you know that you're going to be able to dedicate the time and effort that's needed to put into a dissertation. Yeah,
you really need to want to work on it. If it's a chore or a millstone, then it's just it's going to be, I've got to do finally a project this week because I haven't done any for a couple of weeks. It's going to be really difficult to get motivated. But if it's something that you're passionate about or excited about, you'll just work on it anyway.
I say to my
2 a.m.
every year. I say to my students every single year, if you choose the right topic and you go through the process, and particularly if it's something that's led by a product, the dissertation essentially writes itself, because you've kind of got to do all the researchy stuff we're about to talk about to get to the point where you're confident enough to make it. And once you've made it, you just write up that process. And there's a bit of user testing, and then Bob's your uncle, really. I'm
just going to move the slides on to speed you up now.
So what we're going to discuss, we're going to go through, basically all we've got on each of these slides is just a heading. And basically we've taken a stereotypical dissertation and split it up into the different sections. And we're just going to go through and talk about what might go in those sections, what you should be thinking about. Duke?
Because Jennifer Carter, who is the current module leader for Final Year Project, sent us some text about this kind of stuff recently. So I just wanted to grab that email, but unfortunately it's the wrong capture one.
Cool. In the chat, in the Discord chat, actually, Josh is saying, if you don't typically spend a lot of time researching what you're interested in, how do you realize a topic you're passionate about? That's an interesting question. It's like, how do you decide if you're gonna like it or not? I'm gonna guess that is basically boiling down to.
How did that question crop up?
It's on the Canal Side channel.
Oh,
Hidden somewhere. What?
yeah. Thanks, Josh. How do you know what you're passionate about? Was that the summary?
How do you know that you're gonna find a topic?
Yeah.
Where like it's you're going to be passionate about that topic for a dissertation?
I think
it's a difficult one.
I think you know, unless it depends. If you're trying something experimental or something you've not looked into before because you want to explore it, then hopefully the fact that you're interested in exploring it will maintain the interest for the length of a module. If that makes sense.
I'd add to that you've got to realise that an undergraduate thesis is a very different thing to a PhD or a master's thesis. I think a lot of our students think they've got to sort of like discover something new for an undergraduate thesis, whereas actually they haven't got to do anything of the sort. All they've got to do is do a literature review that tells us what already exists and say, well, I'm making say this product based upon what is currently best practice, and I can prove it's best practice because I read this, and that's really all you have to do. And then again, as I said before, you do a little bit of user testing, and that gets you through most of the problems. So, if you are really you should by now at least 2 years on the course, whether you want to be an environment artist, you want to be a game designer, or something of that nature, then play to your strengths.
Yeah. I've got a little bit more out of Josh here. He basically wants to know, like he says, your exploration answer was quite good. It's that idea of you might not be spending a huge amount of time doing it. So like our artists are always making character art, but as a programmer, you might want to be looking into a new field that you think you might really like and want to explore because you've not really done it before. That's fine. Explore it, examine it, do a lit review on it. So you can pick something that you're interested in, but you're not already pre-passionate about. Maybe that's the way of phrasing that, is that you're not already doing huge amount of research into it, but you want to get into it, is another way of looking at it.
It's also.
But I also add,
just very briefly there, you said that exploring something new that you're not aware of yet, you might actually reach the end of it and have lost the motivation. But hopefully as in you've discovered that the thing you thought was interesting actually isn't interesting. But hopefully your interest would be held long enough to get through the module, at the end of which you'd go, actually, it was an interesting idea, I explored it, but it's not for me, I'm going in this other direction.
I was going to add to that frequently, a lot of our modules are quite prescriptive. You do X, Y, and Z to pass that module, but you don't get a chance to explore outside that. And people just have these interests in sort of, game-related fields in general. And this gives you an opportunity to really explore that in some depth, in somewhere where it's a kind of a safe space and you wouldn't be doing it on other modules. So that's another way of looking at it. And don't take your eye off the ball that it's a 40 credit module. It's a chunk of work. So it really does give you an opportunity to explore in a deep way, if you have those sort of interest initially.
So that first slide said abstract. I thought it'd make us bigger because we're more interesting than the word abstract. So let's talk a little bit about the abstract. The official line explains in less than 300 words the contribution of the project. The way I describe the abstract is 1, you write it at the end, and 2, it is basically your dissertation in 300 words. It's a little bit of an intro about why you're doing it, so a bit of a problem bit, a tiny bit about what other people might be doing and why that's interesting, what you did and what the results are. That's my description of an abstract.
Yeah, it's basically what I tell all my students, I'm guess Daryl says the same, is basically summarize your entire dissertation in that abstract.
And I know some people might be thinking, how do you summarize 12,000, 15,000, 10,000 words in 300 words? It's not that hard because you just pick the interesting bit. In that 12,000 words, it's what was the most interesting stuff, and that'll fit in your 300 words.
To some degree, we start this vlog every week with a similar sort of thing, don't we? Similar sort of premise. What's on the back of the box? I mean, you've all read the sort of the back of a book to figure out whether you're going to enjoy what's the book's about, and it's a similar sort of process. It's a bit more sort of academic than that, but that's a basic premise.
Often you can read in a paper for speed reading, you can read the abstract and the conclusion, and it'll tell you most of what you need to know, or whether it's worth reading the rest of it. We don't do that with dissertations. That's just point that out. We don't mark dissertation. Imagine.
I didn't really want to admit to it.
Well,
it'd be a lot easier if we did.
Yeah, we wouldn't have to sit in hot, stuffy home offices reading dissertations for hours on end if we could mark them like that. But at least for your own research purposes, which we'll talk about in a bit, you can speed read through and at least eliminate papers that you then don't use in your main dissertation very quickly by skipping the abstract and the conclusion and then going, no, this paper isn't appropriate for me, and moving on. So we might talk about that.
We'll come back to that bit when we get to the references section.
So I'm going to stop jumping between these different views actually because of that transition noise. But the introduction is the next one. So this I'll read this text actually because it does kind of suit or gives us a starting point, doesn't it? Explains the context, the problem or area, the clients, the users or audience. Indicate any changes you have made to the initial product specification. Now that the last bit is because there's a formative stage at Christmas or halfway through the module about a product specification based on the research and initial kind of thought process. But I think the important bit here is explains the context and the problem. I always like to start my introductions with what is the problem? What is the question? What are we trying to solve?
Or even simpler, what are we looking at?
Yeah.
Why are we looking? So if you're an artist and you want to look at skin shaders, why are we looking at skin shaders? It's as simple as that. That it could just be, I want to explore how real-time skin works. How do you get how light interact with subsurface scatter and stuff like that? It's like, what is the industry professional workflows? It could be as simple as, why are you looking at it, as opposed to what is the problem? What are you trying to solve?
Yeah. Well, in that context, the problem is I don't know this thing, so I'm exploring it.
If we talk about what shouldn't be an introduction, the amount of dissertations that I've read that start, video games have a long history going back to Pong or Space Invaders or something like that. No one cares. No one cares. It's not relevant to your thesis, is it?
Hey, what
unless it's about game design.
That's how I started my dissertation back in the day.
Is how you're going to start your PhD, Matt?
That's why you got a D.
But no, I think you're right.
How my PhD.
Unless it was about maybe the history of games. But apparently that's all you say, Daryl.
Yeah, thanks.
Pong. Ping pong. Introducing the problem, the area, and giving it some justification. So, and when I say justification, I've read a few this year that said, like a personal justification. So I am doing this because, which might fit like an area. You know, I'm exploring VFX because I want a job in that area or whatever it might be. But sometimes the justification can come from something. Maybe it's a programming one, and the justification might be about moving an AI method forward, or it could be about, I know that in web, for example, they do websites to improve sales on their webs on small businesses. So if there's some kind of rationale or justification, I think can be handy. The one about clients, users, audience, particularly clients, we don't get many game students doing client-based projects. That tends to be computing or web-based students, which is why that's.
There's nothing wrong with it. And again, it's one of those projects that writes itself. If you haven't got a client, a real client, and you're doing some work for them, then you can write up that process, and it can be a very strong dissertation.
Absolutely. Anything else you want to say about the introduction?
No, I think everything will come later.
Okay, so this one is a background research / literature review.
Now, I think this is one area that if students want to try and get a head start over the summer, this is the area that they can start exploring and start looking at.
Yeah, absolutely.
Trying to get a library of references and materials together to actually start writing a lit review.
I'd also say in general, it's the weakest area across the board for the students is actually getting good quality resources. I've frequently seen very, very good projects. You look at the the references, and they're all kind of, they're web-based reference. And when I say everything's on the web, well, what I mean by that is journalistic web-based references, or worse. I found this on someone's blog, and this person, is just offering their opinion. They didn't even work on a particular project. They're not an expert in that field, but they've written this thing, and I'm quoting it because I found it. I found the article interesting, but it's not written from any level of authority whatsoever.
Yeah, those type of blog-based ones and sort of portfolio-based ones can be useful if, as Daryl says, you can back up the claims that they are industry experts in that field, or they've worked on a title that directly links to whatever research you're doing.
I don't think we'd ever pretend that it's easy to find strong games related literature. A lot of the academic literature is incredibly dry, and usually to get published, it's usually it's usually either experimental in nature, or it's developing a new technique or something of that type, and that generally isn't from an art perspective. The programmers won't struggle with that at all, because a lot of what they do is written up in literature. But from an art perspective, it just happens. The problems are solved on the ground on a per game basis, and that very seldom actually ends up in literature. One of the best resources for finding out what goes on there is to look at GDC. So the GDC Vault offers an awful lot of information. But beyond that, Gamma Sutra is very good, and 80 level is very good. So there are places where games designers, games artists, games developers of very different kinds actually write solid articles based upon real world problems that have been solved. But that's what you should be looking for, and you shouldn't be looking for people sort of, doing post-mortems from their bedroom. Essentially,
my advice here would be critical. No, so whatever you find, think about it in a critical. Don't just go, I found it, I'll reference it, which is a common mistake, I think, to just go, well, it's on the web, it must be true. But to be critical and say, is this peer reviewed? Is this referenced elsewhere? Are other people following this advice? Can I find somebody else who agrees or disagrees, and then read both of them and come to a judgment? But don't just copy paste the first links you find. In fact, I think there is some advice in the library about critical reading, but just be critical of the thing you are reading. Don't just accept it at face value, and look for peer reviewed stuff on Google Scholar, or look in journals. And there's a question actually on Twitch here: what are the good or reputable computing and gaming journals that people should be looking at? I mean, for me, SIGGRAPH is the big one, particularly in the graphics world where I come from. So SIGGRAPH is a great place to start. There are others as well, but yeah, particularly on Google Scholar, you can see how many times something has been cited. So that's basically how many times somebody else has referenced that particular piece of work. So if it's got a really high count, it could be seminal work, as in really groundbreaking, early on foundational work that you're looking at, which is the kind of the key stuff. You can then, other papers will have built on that. And there are tricks you can do. You can go, if you find a really good paper, go right to the end, and they will reference other good papers, or most of probably good papers. And then it opens up, that's a good way into opening up more sources, following other people's references.
I think that's absolutely correct. And if you're doing something technical, that's a brilliant way of doing it. And Google Scholar is by far and away the simplest way to find that literature. It's just a matter of doing keyword search, and it will daisy chain in both directions. It'll look like a spider's web, to mix my metaphors. But you can find one paper that will have reference at the back of it, but it'll also tell you who else has cited that. So you flow from there. The other thing, though, is that we have Summon as well. So there are books. We have a library, a digital library, which you can access and look there as well. And that kind of second tier down. Beyond that, as I've already said, now it's worth reiterating. Gamma Sutra 80 level, and I'm missing one, Matt. I can't think which one it is now, but there's another sort of online repository which has a tremendous amount of really good breakdowns of art process and things of that nature, which are written by lead artists in the games industry. They're probably the best thing that you're going to find online.
When Daryl remembers it, we'll put it in the link in the YouTube.
You don't mean like GDC Vault or something, do you?
No, I've already said GDC bot.
Did you?
That's
Okay.
yeah. That's. I think that's more for dev. That's more for development and for design. And again, you don't see a lot of exposition about art process. Art process tends to be 80 level in Gamma Sutra, and this other thing that will not come into my head at this moment.
Ollie
When
suggesting
you remember,
Drawn Hub.
then,
I've not heard of Drawn Hub before.
not a whole of that. Hopefully, it's not what it sounds like. But another thing I tend to tell my art students is that, which sometimes actually puts them in a different frame of mind, is to, if you've got a question about an art process, is actually start by finding the white paper that started that technology that became the art process, and start from there with your spiderweb of research. Find the original research that went into the technique. So if it's let's say we'll just go back to something as simple as a normal map. Find that original white paper, see who started to use it first, where it came from, how it was utilized, and that is a really nice flow of research to actually start exploring. So
as I was saying about seminal work, it's the same equivalent, isn't it? A white paper, which you see a lot of CGraph in the tech side of things. Has Mike gone to sleep?
No, I'm just reading the chat and trying to catch up.
Reese was agreeing with us in the chat that looking at the references in your references makes it easier than trying to find all the sources individually yourself. Which, yes, absolutely. I mean, don't just because they've cited it doesn't mean it's great. They may have been speed citing, if that's a thing. But so still always be critical, just because somebody else references it. We assume it's good.
Now,
don't.
Now, one thing that our students could do over the summer is, and I'll encourage every one of our final year project students to do this, is make a Mendeley account if you've not already got one, and start, as you find things over the summer that you find interesting, put them into that Mendeley account so that you can reference them later really easily. Don't just go, oh, that's cool, I'll remember where that is, because you won't. No. And you'll never be able to find that link again.
Also, the beautiful thing about Mendeley is that it saves you a huge amount of time at the back end of it. What Mendeley does, it's a resource management tool and reference management tool that collects you can collect all the PDFs of everything that you read together in one place. It will create all of the correct referencing for that. So we use APA 6, and that will be the standard that you set as into Mendeley itself. Then the really great part of it, and I couldn't work without it, is the fact that there's a Word plugin. And I do tend to work in Word, as Duke tends to work in LaTeX, which is weird for me. But you basically, when you want to put a reference in there, the plugin allows you just to say, I know this because X. You put the name of the author in there, it auto generates the reference for you, and then automatically generates your table of your table of references at the back end. And anytime you make any amendments to your paper, if you remove one, it removes it from the table of references as well. So there's none of that manual nonsense of having to create your references, which, going from a background before this existed and having to write things in that way, the pain of going through your entire 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 word document, trying to find out what you have referenced and what you haven't, that's now been completely alleviated. It's great.
It also means that it auto writes the reference style for you, because there are different styles of referencing, and if you just tell Mendeley to use APA 6, the Word plugin to use APA 6, it formats it correctly for you, rather than you going into the APA 6 guide and going, well, if it's a website, it's this, if it's a game, it's the other. It just does it. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Mendeley. I don't use Word so much. I tend to use LaTeX, but it doesn't really matter at this stage. Right with whatever tool makes you is the easiest to write in. So if you're a Word fan, fine. If you're living in this century, then LaTeX is the future, obviously.
So a couple of links I just dropped in the chat there is obviously a link to Mendeley, and recommend everyone make an account over the summer or as you're starting your final year project. Yeah. Another one is Overleaf if you're interested in using LaTeX, which is I guess especially the programmers. Basically, I recommend all the programmers use it, and any of the designers that are a little bit more tech savvy, we'll say. Could easily use it. I myself and Duke use it a lot. Daryl prefers Word.
Another
definitely.
I kind of
definitely
get my head
useful.
around it a bit, but I don't like it. I don't like doing hypertext of any kind, really. So there you go.
Something else
preference.
for Mendeley is the collaboration side of things. You can create groups and invite people, which if you end up, if you find somebody else is working on a similar project, you could invite them to a group and share your references. Now, of course, you're not sharing the written side of things, so this isn't plagiarism or collusion. You're just sharing a database of references, but you can also share that with your supervisor when you get them. So your supervisor can see not only your list of references, they can see your notes on those references as well. And they can maybe then suggest other things to read or offer tips. So they might say, hang on, it's looking a little Wikipedia heavy, for example. You need to get some more academic work in there. So that there's many benefits to Mendeley.
The mad part is there that Wikipedia always shows its references. I've never understood anyone that's put Wikipedia itself in the references, but they do.
Yeah, Mendeley also has a Chrome plugin, so wherever you are, you can just click it and it will scrape the data out of the system. And something we didn't talk about with Google Scholar, if you Google Scholar search from home, you probably can't get to the paper because it's just you in your own private residence. But if you search through the university systems, through, say, UniDesktop, because it knows you're then in a university context, you can often get to those papers. Now, it varies. Sometimes you can log in through the open authentication system, Athens, and it will still give you the paper. Sometimes it won't. But if you can't get to a paper at home, don't give up. Try again from on campus, either virtually or physically, when we can get back there.
Yeah, UniDesktop's incredibly valuable for that.
Yeah. So don't give up if you struggle at home.
To put what Duke's saying in context as well, I mean, I've had students actually come to me and say, "Well, there's the thing I wanted to read, but it said I was at home. It said it was going to cost me £25 to look at it, and it will cost you that per paper. Well, if you were willing to pay it, it would. But that's what's one of the things that you pay. People always say, "Well, I pay my fees for." Well, that's one of the things you pay your fees for. A tremendous amount of the fees go to the library to subscribe to these resources, so that when you're writing a thesis, it's free. And you can read as many as you want, download those PDFs and keep them so that you can reference from them later. And you can highlight, all that stuff you can do. I tend to be a bit of a Luddite as far as this stuff's concerned still. I tend to print things out where they really seminal papers, and I will take a highlighter pen to them and put post-it notes in there. And it's incredibly retro, but I like it. But you can do all that stuff digitally.
Retro for the win.
Yeah.
While we're on this subject, actually, but because I don't think it fits anywhere else in the chat, when we're talking about tools, Grammarly, all the way. Most of our students will make grammar mistakes, and a lot of you are out of the habit of writing, if you're ever in the habit in the first place. And you can set the written style, Emily, as well. So if you're supposed to be writing in an academic style, then you can tell Grammarly that's what you're supposed to be doing, and it will correct everything for you and make suggestions. It is possibly, for those of you who are taking it very seriously, worth getting a month's subscription at the back end of it and going pro for a month at the back end of your dissertation. It doesn't cost a huge amount of money. The other thing is, on that note, that we still prefer, and I certainly do prefer, to read a dissertation written in the third person. I'm not keen on first person written dissertations. They just sound weird. I did this and I did the other.
It's not a criteria, first or third, but I think most academics prefer third. It's nice that you blamed you said the students were terrible at grammar. Thanks for completely missing out my slide at the beginning. I think I should have Grammarly'd that one, shouldn't I?
Yeah, but yeah.
What's speed typing for? Speed typing. Yeah, known for making mistakes.
I think next up is actually one that students probably will struggle a lot with.
It is methodology.
Methodology. How do you decide what methodology you're going to use when doing a dissertation?
We should define methodology first, because I think a lot of people don't even know really what methodology is. So I quickly Googled it to see what the Oxford definition of methodology was. And it is a system of methods used in a particular area of study or activity, which I thought, well, that doesn't really help a lot.
Circular, isn't it?
Yeah. What is methodology? It's a method.
Yeah, so that's not going to help.
Ology based on methods.
Yeah. So I thought, so let's do our definitions of methodology then. So I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, it's laying down. It's a recipe. Would you, at the simplest level, it's a recipe of procedures and techniques that you're going to use to identify what you're doing, to select the right stuff, to process it, analyze the results. Recipe is the easiest word I can think of that describe for methodology.
Well, I think it's also process, isn't it? It's a process that you're going to go through. So it defines how it is you're going to tackle the entire. I can't think of another word other than process now. I've said it out loud.
Well, that's what I was thinking with recipe, because recipe includes not just ingredients but process, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. But it is. I mean, if you're doing something that is of a scientific bent, then you'll set out with a hypothesis, and you'll find, or even a null hypothesis, and find ways of proving or disproving that. But from our perspective, when we're talking about an undergrad thesis, particularly, I'll go back to it again. If you're a games artist, it's always a difficult thing because it's you're going a methodology for a games art project, but it can be as sort of simple as finding out about your subject, creating an artifact or a series of artifacts, and then doing some level of analysis and preferably some level of iteration on that. And if you can write that up in a coherent manner, that becomes your methodology. You don't have to sort of piggyback on sort of step templates for a methodology. You can define your own, and you can talk to your supervisor about what it is that is the best sort of kind of fit for what you want to do. And as long as you write that up in a sort of coherent manner, it can only be a paragraph as well. It doesn't have to be like 5 pages of methodology. It can be very, very brief, and as long as it exists and it defines what it is you're aiming to do, or as these things are quite often written retrospectively have done, it should be fine.
Matt, do you want to add anything on?
It is best to do it in advance, by the way. I probably shouldn't have said that.
Yeah, I think you kind of summed it up there. It is, what is the process you are going to go about research? What is the structure of that process? So are you going to try and do it in a qualitative sort of process where, as Daryl says, you're going to do some research, you're going to make an artifact, and then you're going to do some kind of testing on it, whether that's a questionnaire, whether that's you're going to do, we've had people in the past do really well by making tutorials to actually teach other people their research and what they've done, and then actually getting the feedback off that tutorial, or are you going to do it in more of a quantitative process and actually try and get some data you can analyze? There's lots of different, depending on what you choose as your final year project and your area of study, there's lots of ways of approaching it, but having a good idea about what it is you want to try and achieve and how you're going to get there. That's kind of how I would look at it.
There's some really good books on methodology, because there's a lot of methodologies out there on the people follow depending on the field. So my suggestion would be to have a think about your idea of a methodology, talk it through with your supervisor, and they may suggest some existing methodologies or point you in different directions. But
I think when you say there are books out there on this, I wouldn't recommend that for an undergrad. I think that's postgrad.
Well, there is a really good one, actually.
Talking to your supervisor is probably at this level the main thing that you need to do.
There is a good one I use for in my, what's the module called? Prototyping 3, which escapes me right now, and it's a really nice introduction. I'm hoping if Reese is watching, he might post it because he read it. I can't, names escape me off the top of my head, but if Reese posts it or anybody else, then I'll put it in the chat. But it's a really nice introduction to research and methodologies, and it's written in a very accessible way. So it's not like a dummy's guide, but it's a good book, even for undergrad as well.
Cool.
Right, next, implementations / findings / analysis. So as Jenny wrote, this is where you now follow your methodology and document what you do as you go along. But I would add, don't oversimplify it and have the "I opened Unreal, And then I opened my models and I imported them by dragging and dropping, and it was shiny. That it's not that level of detail. I think it's something to point out, which I have seen, that very descriptive level of, there we go, Reese to the rescue. Research methods, the basics. Well done. So in the chat, well, maybe we'll put it in the YouTube or something. So it's just
we'll put it as a link in the YouTube video.
Yeah, research methods, the basics by Nicholas Walliman. So yeah, I've seen these very descriptive implementation and less analytical, and I think that's the key, isn't it? The key difference is to demonstrate higher critical thinking and analytical skills, rather than just being descriptive of I did this, I did the other. That's my thoughts.
I think this is the write-up of the product, essentially. So you've done your research, you've done your lit review, you know all about that subject area, that tiny little slither of the entire game development pipeline. You've researched as much as you can about it, and now this is you building something to demonstrate that knowledge and documenting that process. So anyone that does advanced viz, we talk a lot about that documentation process and how a sketchbook should be. Now, actually, this is to take it even further than that, and actually sort of say, like, let's actually write it up in an academic way so that people can actually understand what you've done and why you've done it.
I'll just put a link to that book. There's a free PDF. There's a PDF render. It seems to be free because it's on. It's free on one of the American EDU sites. The PDF is available for download of that book. So even better.
Definitely worth having a read of.
Yeah.
Anything to add to this section, Daryl? Is the product section?
Not really. I think you've covered most of it. I would just say, that the process that you go through when doing this, you really do need to tie it to your research. I mean, that's one thing that tends to get lost. The implementation should stem from what you've already learned, so you're referring back to that, and that's probably the only thing I would add to it.
Cool.
A brief answer from me. Who'd have thought?
Yeah,
I'm in shock. I'm like, hey, what? He stopped talking, and I'm still. And it's like under an hour. What's going on?
Yeah, I think I just reiterate for those that might have missed that your dissertation is a two-parter. Essentially, it is the dissertation itself, which is the write-up, and then also the product that goes along with the dissertation, which is the demonstration of knowledge. So when you're deciding what to do, so let's say we take that example that I gave before of your research into skin shaders in real time, you might actually build a character and a face rig with the skin shader and showcase multiple different skin shaders. Actually, it's one of your projects, Matt. I'm just going to use an example that you can probably talk about more than I can because you saw it more than I did. But one of my favorite projects that I've seen over the last few years, and it's always difficult for artists to sort of like frame a problem in inverted commas. But one of your supervisees just made 3 characters in 3 different art styles, very distinct art styles. And I think that was a great project because you could see the development work, you could see the research work, you could see what the desired outcome was, and then the user testing was out of these. They created 3 characters for 3 games, but of these sort of like 10 games or whatever, here's the art style of these 10 games. Here are characters from these 10 games. Which art style is most close to, does this character I've created most closely resemble? And it's a really good quantitative way of saying, I, as an artist, managed to achieve my goal of working in a particular style or creating an artwork of worth. And that, again, I think I thought that was a really clever project. I thought it was a very well developed project, but it's a process that can be utilized by loads of people. We haven't really encouraged people to do it. Much longer answer this time around, I know, but there you go. But I mean, you've got
good to see you back, Daryl.
Do that. He's back in the room. Yeah.
I'm trying to
Oh, by the
remember
way,
which...
sorry, can you guys hear my neighbour? Because she used to be out in the garden.
No.
Can you? No, that's good. Right.
We're good.
No.
I'm trying to put which dissertation are you referring to? I'm trying to work out which student.
Don't ask me that question. I can't remember.
I remember a 3-character one
Was it?
in different styles, but that was last year, wasn't it? Not this year.
Yeah, it was last year. Yeah, it might have been Jack. I don't know.
Jackie. No, yeah. I remember a 3 different style one.
Chloe, I remember Chloe did the one where she did three characters in
It'd be really funny if it was
generations. 3 different generations of software. So she did one that she made in Max 1 point something, and then she did one that just used modeling, and then she did one that used sculpting. But I don't. It might have been one of Duke's then. Not
might have been one of mine.
Right.
Maybe just Matt was
anyway.
contributing.
It just stuck in my head, and again, I thought it. I also graded that particular project you're talking about, and that was interesting, but it didn't tick the "I'm a great artist" because box, and this project that I was talking about definitely did, and I would encourage anybody that's going down the route of utilizing this 40 credit module. Let's not forget how big it is again. To become a great artist, that's a fantastic way of just doing the user testing, and it does kick out real results. If you ask 25 people which art style you've managed to create something in, then you're going to get real data back from that.
Cool. Right, onwards.
So next up is
evaluation / discussion. There's 2 of these. The first one being of the product. So how well, in a nutshell, how well does the product meet the original goals set out in that first phase of that first design specification phase? So if you aim to build something, how well did it match that?
I might have just jumped ahead a little bit there, but yeah, there we go. What I just said.
Yeah. Well, I kind of want to also say the thing that frustrates me when I read these about the evaluation section, where they've done an entire dissertation and then they get to the evaluation and just conclude it with, yeah, I think I did really well. I made this thing and it was really good. Well, yeah, but how are you justifying whether that was really good? That's what we want to know. That's what an evaluation is a justification of, yes, you think it's good, but can you prove that it was good through testing, feedback, whatever it might be? And did it meet that requirement?
And again, I would add to that some of the best work that I've seen on in this particular area is where they go straight to the right people and ask whether they did the right thing. So it's all well and good. I just said, does my character meet the art style of X? But a lot of the lead artists or the the art directors of video games companies are on Twitter. You can find out who they are, and they probably overjoyed. As long as you don't all choose the same person, but they'd probably be overjoyed to get someone that says, "I really love what you did from the art, because they set the art style. I really love what you did in X. I am looking at your work for my thesis, and I've tried to replicate what you did. And what do you think of my work?" And that's the best way to evaluate something of that nature.
Yeah. Although the ones that I look back over the last few years and that were really strong on the evaluation section were the ones that literally reached out to different people, and in their presentation they're showing, look, I've got a Twitter chat here, or an ArtStation chat with X lead artist who I showed the work to, and this is their comments, and then I did this questionnaire with 30 people and they all said this. So actually having that feedback is really important.
Gary's
just posted it. Yes, I was just looking at it. That's completely awesome, Gary. Thank you for that.
Yeah, wow. dearartdirector.tumblr.com. I've not seen that before.
No,
all right.
That's
I
really
haven't time to read it now, obviously, but yeah, that looks really cool.
Yeah, so I think that's worth looking at that.
So next up
is the evaluation discussion of the project process. So this is more being critically evaluating your performance as a whole on the project. So this is more reflective than testing based.
Yeah. I think actually one thing to take into consideration is when you get to the evaluation point, it's just as valid to evaluate that something didn't work as it is to say something did work, as long as you can justify why it didn't work. So,
or how you would fix that in the future and what you've learned through the process. I mean, that's not to justify saying I lost interest halfway through this. Therefore, my project's rubbish because that's just pathetic.
So let's say, Darryl, the example of I made this character in X art style and I sent it to this art director, I did this questionnaire, and actually all of these feedbacks and comments said that it doesn't match the art style. And so I went back, I analyzed, I reviewed why it didn't, what I needed to change, and then maybe you actually show some iteration of I went back and actually tried to tweak it and tried to get it closer to it. That would be a really good way. Yeah. If you can say, yeah, this is where I spent most of my time this year, and as I got to the end, all the testing, all the feedback was saying I didn't accomplish it. So I tried to iterate, and hopefully I've managed to accomplish that. That's a really good way of tackling that.
What we haven't mentioned at this stage is the fact that so many people save this up for whatever reason. They don't treat it as a linear project. They treat it as a block at the last as a panic at the last few weeks of the final semester. And if you go through that process correctly, if you start, you'll just doing interesting literature review because you're interested in your project. We've already covered all of that. But you start that now. The process is fairly straightforward. You just do it bit by bit. You get to a particular point. If you're doing a poster around Christmas, then hopefully you've got something to show on that poster, and you can get useful feedback on it. Then you can iterate on that. But if you go through the process you've just described, you might have 2, 3, 4 different rounds of iteration, and that's part of the process. If you write that up effectively, showing that you've had critique and how you've understood and learned from that critique and how you developed, that for us is exactly what we're looking for, and that will change what could have been, say, a low B, C grade project into an A grade project almost overnight.
Yeah, Gary has said, raise his hand. I did that, and it was hell. Don't do it, as in cramming at the end. I think the other thing with evaluation, I was thinking while you were talking, is I think you said it actually, but demonstrating learning, and it's reflective thinking as well. So it's, as you say, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? What would I do in the future differently? What have I learned from this experience, and how will I use that in the future? We like to, a lot of education is about doing something and learning from that in order to be able to do it differently next time and do it better. What's the don't let the ball up at the end of the year? Yeah. So the next one is, if we're happy to move on, conclusions. My biggest piece of advice here is, well, it depends on the results, is try not to be too concrete. So, if you write at the end, the earth is flat. It's picking a really daft example, obviously, but to say something so definitively, I think often I will suggest that students use words like suggest. The data suggests that the earth is flat, or the results point toward this thing being true. Try not to be too definitive, too absolute, because it just opens you up to a lot of critical questioning in the examination phase, in the Viva bit, where we're just going to, what about this data disagrees with what you're saying, or you've only had 3 people test this, how can you be so definitive? And I think for me that's the main piece of advice with conclusions. It's just that the data suggests it's true,
and also
or false.
It's very difficult to draw conclusions from anything other than quantitative data, and good quantitative data at that.
Yeah.
If all you have, we saw quite a few of those this year, is garbage in, garbage out questions where you're asking, but for binary, do you like X, yes or no? And there's no, Likert scales are very good if we haven't talked about what they are, but you'll have seen them, those sort of like 5 circle things from I like it a lot to I hate it, and everything else in between. And they can be 5 or 7 circles. If you use data like that, you can then sort of draw inferences from that data. But if you ask sort of like yes, no questions, or you say, what's your favorite game? What are you going to gain from that? It doesn't lead you anywhere. Somebody that I asked said his favorite game was X. Well, whoop-de-doo. What does that mean? It means absolutely nothing. But we see that all the time, of asking pointless questions that lead nowhere. So formulating questions and and gathering data that can actually lead to conclusions is part of the process. And again, talk to your supervisor about that. Make sure you don't fall into that trap. But, if ultimately all you can really produce is a pie chart that says, I asked 10 people what their favorite genre of game was, and 3 of them said that they like RTS games. It's like, well, yeah, great. You asked 10 people. Unless you ask 10,000 people that question, it doesn't mean anything. So you've got to ask the right questions to get the right data to draw conclusions from.
Yeah, and that kind of.
I was just going back to something that Darryl said there about the questionnaires. Just a quick tip from me on questionnaires is obviously to research how to design questionnaires, but one really rapid one is to think of them backwards. So figure out what you want to know, and then think of a question that will tell you the thing you want to know, rather than thinking, I should probably ask them their age and their gender and what game they like, which then might not tell you anything useful. Think about what you would like to know. I would like to know if more women play this particular style of game than men. So, okay, well, I'll need a gender question. Do you see what I mean?
You'll also need a massive sample set, though.
And, well, yes.
And you'll probably need data from the manufacturers. You won't be able to do that via a questionnaire on Facebook.
But suggest.
The point is, it's a great example, Duke, because they do it all the time.
Well, yeah.
And you get to the back end of a thesis, and you're going, this is meaningless. Why have you written this? You've asked 10 people, a question, and realistically, you needed 1 million people to answer that question.
Yeah,
I think that comes neatly to what I was going to say is the importance of sample size, and actually that idea of if you're going to do a questionnaire, that it really does matter how many people you get to fill that questionnaire out, and actually the type of person you get to fill it out. As we were saying before, it's a lot more valuable to have one art director look at your work and comment it than 10,000 12-year-olds that don't really know anything about the games industry. So not only is the sample size important, it's the quality of the sample itself.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you can hunt down the right people, that's going to be far more valuable. Okay, anything else on conclusions?
I think you've concluded conclusions.
Concluded conclusions. Okay, I've put references and then bibliography ? And that's because we get a lot of people, one, asking how you do it, which we have talked about. We're using Mendeley and tools like that to build a reference list automatically. But one of the questions I get often is, what's the difference between references and bibliography? So the brief answer is references are things or bits of information, so papers, websites, whatever it might be, that you are directly referencing. So Bob said this, you referenced Bob. Bibliography is things you have read around the subject, wider reading, books, papers that are useful, but you don't directly reference. That's my definition.
I'd also like to add to that I seldom care about the bibliography from that perspective. I don't think it's really relevant. You've been reading things and you've been digesting things your entire life, and it will form who you are.
It's very rare actually to see
a very specific. Yeah, this is a very specific piece of work, and the references are vital. We need to know how you know something and how you're backing up the fact that you think you know something. I don't care that you've read a book once upon a time. It's kind of irrelevant to me.
They are sometimes useful, but. In fact,
I would say
almost, APA they don't use bibliography. It is rare. In fact, in some situations, it's really hard to trigger a bibliography. Like in LaTeX, it's not the easiest thing to do, is it? To add a second one sometimes, depending on the template you use.
I forget they exist.
Yeah,
proper references list is all you need to pack. Again, it's writing a thesis, a process. But what if we talk about anything here? We are talking about the process that we actually, adhere to as far as writing a thesis. References is absolutely vital. Writing them in APA 6 is absolutely vital. That is the university system. If you don't do it in that, you can be in bother for doing that.
Yeah.
However, a bibliography is kind of neither here nor there. It's almost like thanking your mum and dad at the beginning of your thesis. Thanks to my mum and dad for being supportive.
We didn't mention that acknowledgements.
Yeah.
Again, I always think that's far more
if you have Darryl as a supervisor, acknowledge him and you get 5% extra.
5% what extra?
5% more abuse. I only mentioned bibliography really because it's in Jenny's list as a thing. But yeah, it's quite rare to see. I can't think of a recent example of somebody using it, but anyway, it's a thing.
I wouldn't bother.
And then finally, I'll acknowledge him with a tenner, and you get a free passing grade. Apparently, that's all of us has.
Tenner.
Tenner.
People have actually asked this question live on a video stream that's going to go onto YouTube later, and people have also always said to me, "Can you be bribed?" And I'll give you the same answer now that I've given everybody else. Yes, I can be bribed, but you've basically got to make me so rich I can retire forever in a yacht.
So a winning lottery ticket is the only way.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're on to our final bit is appendices.
What is an appendice?
What is an appendix? It's a thing you get taken out. So the appendices are the stuff that doesn't fit in the main body of the document, and it supports the main body of the document. So it might be, for example, your questionnaires. Some people put all their questionnaires, depending if they've done paper-based questionnaires. It might be code blocks, potentially. It might be if you've presented something of interest, some mathematical concept or something like that, and you want to expand on it further, you might use your appendices in that way. It might be more detailed designs. It might be a user guide for people to follow. If for using the product that you've developed, you could put like a little user guide in the appendices. Anything else for the appendices?
No, I would do the inverse. Actually, I would just say a lot of the time, certainly I think a lot of people used to include them when we used to print their thesis out. To get the sort of like depth of the wad of paper, they would put all of their data in and everything, and they put it all in there on sort of like single side and double line spacing and all this sort of stuff. I don't think it's that relevant. I think if you can give a breakdown of what you've done, I don't want to see every response, particularly if it's quite verbose. If you're doing qualitative questioning and you're trying to gather data that people are giving written responses to, I don't want to see all that in the appendices. I really couldn't care less. I'm not going to read it. I think it's just added bulk. A lot of the time.
It is, but it's often supporting bulk, though, isn't it? I mean, sometimes you may have read the answers, or in fact, there's a good example of this where I've actually found the appendices to be useful, where a student presented their results from their questionnaires, and they suggested the data told one story, but it didn't quite make sense. And I actually went into the appendices. I studied their results, and I found that the story was slightly different. It wasn't wrong. They'd missed a few bits from their analysis.
I must admit, I've done the same sort of thing, but what I'm saying there is that they should find ways of condensing the size of that data down. They don't have to provide us the actual photocopies of every sheet that you sent out.
I see.
If you can condense that down into a sort of like a smaller spreadsheet where sort of like the data had some level of collation done to it, I think that would be far more useful. Having to go through every single answer sheet and trying to process that in your head, all that data should have been put into Excel or something similar to that prior to this. You should all be using SPSS. There we go. Maybe not. But,
if you don't know what SPSS is, it's Excel with superpowers.
It's like bells, whistles coming out the wazoo. Yeah. But yeah, I think you should condense that down. I don't think you should be putting 100 pages of nonsense at the back of an 80-page thesis.
No, but I think that kind of sums up a very typical dissertation. All the different headers that you should have and all things you should be thinking about. I think things that you should, if you want to try and get a head start on this over the summer and do something, is that you should definitely be deciding on what the subject is that you want to research and look into. And as we said at the beginning, pick something that you would like. You should be starting your research and your lit review and just hunting down journals, hunting down articles, and adding them to your Mendeley list.
I'd add to that. It's absolutely crucial. You've got to figure out how you're going to study it. So think of a process that's going to tick all of the boxes we've already described. You should have passions. Everybody has, their sort of like, their keenness in a particular field. And I've said before that you should be really linking it to what you think you want to do after you graduate. So, if you want to be a level designer, then think about things that you could develop in a sort of a level design perspective. But how are you going to analyze that? How are you going to test that what you think you know about level design is actually true? And how are you going to improve? So set out to answer those questions and to develop your skill set via your thesis. That's probably the best advice I could give on the subject.
So as Matt said there, that's what was it you said, a summary? It was an hour and a half summary for final year project.
Yeah.
Dissertation. We shouldn't invite Daryl to these, should we?
Actually, I think it was
useful.
Oh, I wasn't going to say useful. I was going to say quite short for Daryl.
Yeah, I'm quite short though. I'm only slightly taller than Duke.
Yeah, we're in the wrong order here, aren't we? No.
Yeah. So hopefully that helped those that are in the chat now, or those that are going to watch this later on YouTube, just to get a better idea about what the final year project is and how you should go about it. Because when you get into your individual groups with your supervisor, is that we all say the same things, but you don't hear us all say it at the same time. So each one of you will have your own little discussions with your supervisor, and then you'll come together and say, well, Matt said this and Daryl said that and Duke said this. Well, we're all saying the same thing, but probably in slightly different ways.
Yeah.
So I think this is quite a good way of sort of condensing it down, so you can actually see that we're all on the same page. We all know what the university wants to see from a dissertation.
Yep. And next year, when we have to do an online lecture about this, we're just going to play this video.
Yeah. All from 1 meter away. In fact, are you 1 meter away down there? Just can't poke in the head.
I don't know. I just don't. Have you got a pen, Matt? Have you got a pen to hand somewhere? Do you have a pen? Because I just feel like I should be able to sort of get my pen, and I got to go the wrong way with the camera. Pass it to Matt like that.
If you just put
we
your
all need
hand
the same biro
straight up, it'll look like you are controlling him like a puppet.
Where is he? I can never get the angle. It's that one, isn't it?
No, it's the other one.
I can't do it. It's all so confusing. It's not mirrored. It makes no sense.
Yeah. Let's not measure pens on Twitch.
God, we're gonna have to end it there.
Yeah.
This office is ridiculously hot. I shut my window so you won't get traffic on the stream.
My missus, I got the door open, so I got a steady stream of air, and she was on a meeting downstairs, and she's been in and shut the door, and I'm absolutely roasting. I had ice in this glass, and I've been pressing it against my legs, and it's all completely melted.
Yeah. So I hope you all enjoy your week of summer, because this is apparently we're getting a roughly a week of nice hot weather. So all enjoy it as we sit in our office.
Yeah. We'll see you all next week.
Cheers.
Have a good
I was about to hit stop streaming then. I should run the outro, shouldn't I?